Hello everyone and welcome to Behind the Sermon. I'm John Rhodes and I'm here with Chris Gregg. How you doing today, Chris?
Doing great, John, thanks.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that you're here today. It's snowing outside, amazingly. I think it was like 60, 70 degrees out yesterday or something like that.
It was a beautiful day yesterday.
Yeah, now we have snow. So living in the Midwest, I suppose. That's how it goes.
That's right.
That's how it goes. Well, hey, if you're joining us today and you did not get a chance to hear Chris's sermon yesterday, it was awesome. I loved it. It was a little depressing there when you mentioned the whole getting into your 80s, living day by day. But you know,
seasonal or day by day. Made it to 4:30.
Yeah.
Made it to dinner.
There you go.
Made it to bedtime.
I am not 80, so I don't know how that feels. But, you know, someday I'm sure I'll get there. If not 80, I'll be close to it.
Yeah.
So. Well, if you didn't get a chance to listen to Chris's sermon yesterday, you can always go to the podcast page on our website and you can be able to listen to it there. And we do recommend listening to the sermon before you listen to this. Not that, you know, you can't get anything out of this, but this is just a recap of the sermon and going a little bit more in depth. So listen to the sermon first and then listening to this always helps. So, Chris, yesterday you talked about Tim McGraw. Right. This whole series, I don't want to say it's based on this song.
Live Like You Were Dying.
Right, but the whole idea of Live Like You're Dying, it kind of comes from this song by Tim McGraw. If you are a country music fan, you know the song. How old is it now, did you say? Like 7?
It was recorded in 04. So it's 15 years old. It's not a new song. 15
years. But hey, it's one of those songs that I was talking to people and they said that's one of my favorite songs ever written. You know, so it's one of those timeless classic songs for people. So I mean, I don't know all the words to it, but it's instantly once I heard it, I knew the song. Well, Chris, you talked about Tim McGraw yesterday. My question to start out is if you could meet any country music star, other than Tim McGraw, because obviously you're a fan of him, but if you could meet any country music star, who would it be? Well,
there's a lot of them.
Oh yeah?
There's a lot. And I like all kinds of music, so just because I use a country song in this series doesn't mean I won't use a modern rock song in the next series if it really touches me. But George Strait is probably the king of country. I like George Strait, Garth Brooks, I like Shania Twain. Somebody else I would love to meet, Dolly Parton. Yeah. And she does a song with King of Country that I really like that she just recorded. And so I just like all kinds of genres of music, and actually this kind of spoke to me, this Live Like You Were Dying at this stage, and even when it came out, it was just one of those songs that made me stop and think about my life.
Right.
So,
well, and it's one of those songs, oh go ahead. I was going to say, it's one of those songs, even if you're, you know, in your 20s or in your 30s and you're saying to yourself, well, I'm not, you know, living day by day in my 80s now or anything like that. The whole idea, like you said, is just live your life. Live like you're actually having a life. Actually have a life. Don't just skate through life day by day by day and be doing nothing. So
just don't get caught up in that repetitious cycle like the hamster on the wheel.
Yes, very true. Well, Chris, yesterday, one thing you said, which goes along with what we're saying, is you made a big point to live intentionally. Right. You know, and when you were talking about that, you didn't use this scripture in your sermon, but it reminded me of one scripture in Mark chapter 8, verses 34 through 35. And I'll read it real fast if you don't have the whole Bible memorized. It's okay, I don't either. So I'll read it real fast for us. In verse 34 it says, "Then calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said," this would be Jesus, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it." So what does it mean for us to give up our lives for the sake of the good news? And does that fit into living intentionally?
I think so. I think that living intentionally is following Jesus. Just like we say, you know, we guide people home to a loving Father, caring family, life-changing faith, and we believe the Bible, love others, seek God first, and share Christ. What we used to call the sanctuary or the auditorium, we call the worship center.
Right.
And I think that's kind of cool because what is our worship center is us.
Right.
And we should be God-centered, and everything flows from that God center. When we get off course and we get distracted or unfocused and live without clarity or intention, we're not God-centered anymore. And so I have all kinds of hobbies. I have all kinds of things that I want to do with my life, even at this age. And they're great things. And I look forward to them. I will thoroughly enjoy them. But that's not the purpose of my life. My purpose of my life is to follow Jesus, to take up that cross and live for Him. And out of that, then we can enjoy a lot of our lives. We're not pursuing happiness. Happiness can become our worship center. We're pursuing things. I have a lot of things. That's not our worship center.
Right.
What we own, who we know, that's not our worship center. Our worship center comes from God, from Christ alone, and then everything else flows from there. And that gives us intention and purpose and clarity and wisdom to live our lives.
Right.
It brings us back into center.
Right.
So that's what I mean by intentional living.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And that you're actually touching on what I was going to go to next, was the point you made about don't squander your life.
Absolutely.
You know, and I thought to myself, well, you know, you're saying live intentionally, you're saying don't squander your life. Sometimes we can think to ourselves, well, I'm not going to squander my life if I live intentionally for my kids, if I live intentionally for my sport, if I live intentionally for, you know, the people around me. Well, those are all good things to live for, and we want to live for those things. At the end of the day, we want our main focus to all be under God.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and those other things, our family, our kids, our hobbies, things like that, those will all come into, those will all put themselves on our list of the most important things the correct way. So what would you say to somebody who says, you know, Chris, I am living intentionally. I'm living intentionally for my kids. I'm living intentionally for my family. You know, I am living intentionally. What would you say to somebody who tried to describe living intentionally as living for my kids, living for my family?
I think that, again, we're off center. I think there's a lot of good things. Like, you know, for me as a pastor, I can work at the church all the time.
Right.
And that wouldn't be healthy. That's not being God-centered. It's doing what I am called to do and doing it well, or as well as I can, and still honoring God by taking care of my family and taking care of my children and doing right by them. But if we worship our spouse or we worship our children, and that comes first in our lives, then we're out of balance.
Right.
That they're not going to bring us happiness. They're not going to bring us life. We're going to try to generate life out of them, but that's not the purpose. That's not their purpose. Our purpose is love, to serve them, to hold them accountable in right relationship. Out of our love for God, then we're going to take care of our family better than what they would if they were first in our lives or priority.
Right. And wouldn't you say that the best way to live for your family, your kids, the other people in your life, wouldn't you say the best thing to do living for them is to live for God first?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Seek first the kingdom.
Right. Yeah.
And then His righteousness. And then all that other stuff will fall into place.
Yeah.
We don't have trouble crowding in our stuff. We have trouble crowding out God and allowing our stuff too easily to take first place in our life.
Right.
The other stuff.
Yeah. And that was something we were talking about in Kids Zone yesterday. I love that, you know, I was sitting there listening to the sermon in first service. That's one of the reasons why we don't have kids stuff in first service, is so that me and our Week Kids director Brenda were able to go to service, and we really appreciate that. That is something that we love that the church does. But as I was sitting there listening to your sermon, I thought to myself, you know, we're talking about almost the same exact thing in Kids Zone. We're talking about distractions. It's easy to tell a kid, hey, get off your video game. That's a distraction.
Right.
You know? But it's hard when you tell an adult or you tell somebody who knows a little bit more about their life and stuff like that, hey, stop letting the future be a distraction, or stop letting, you know, your job be a distraction.
Or your 6 hours of video games a night, or Netflix binging all weekend.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I mean, I'll be honest, for me, I love getting home, plopping on the couch, and watching some Netflix. Yeah. And, you know, me and my wife were just talking about the other day. She said, when was the last time we didn't just sit down and watch TV together, and we actually did something? We played a game. We you know, just talked. And I said, you know, it hasn't been that long, but I couldn't tell you the exact day. And I knew that was a problem, because I had gotten comfortable just coming home, sitting down, watching Netflix, you know, working on my computer, stuff like that. And so Hannah gives me quite a few good wake-up calls, as I'm sure your wife probably does.
Absolutely.
The same for you.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, one thing, as you were talking about the distractions, that I thought was a big thing for us adults that you were also talking about is how the future can be a distraction, unfortunately. You said things like, well, someday I'll do this. Well, someday I'll be good. Well, someday I'll be baptized. Can you just speak a little bit more about how the future can be a distraction for us and how we need to be cautious of that?
Sure. We put off a lot of things that should be done in the now, in the moment, and say tomorrow or someday. And someday never comes. Someday I'll talk to my spouse. Someday I'll be more intentional in my marriage or with my child. And all of a sudden someday is gone and it never arrives. And so what we have is that we have this moment, this day, the present that we need to make the most of right now.
Right.
And the other thought is, a lot of times in our minds when we go to idle or neutral, when we shift into neutral in our minds when we go home or at night when we wake up, a lot of times that negative thought or that struggle at work or that struggle at home or that issue or what we're trying to plan on in the future, either investment or job or career or family, comes into play.
Right.
How does that all fit in to taking care of the present and being in the moment?
Right.
I mean, sometimes all of that is just another distraction.
Yeah. Yeah, and we don't tell you this to get you down and make you feel like, oh man, I'm doing this wrong or anything like that. We actually want to encourage you by telling you this and say, hey, look, maybe this is something you didn't notice or something like that, but yeah, the future can be a huge distraction in our lives.
It's not that we shouldn't plan, we should plan.
Right.
But we should not allow the plan to invade this moment, this opportunity, the now, in the situation. And too often I do that, and we just have to be on guard and say, hey, what can I do now?
Yeah.
What should I be doing now?
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, Chris, and sharing a little bit more from behind the sermon. I know I enjoy this. I know that our Facebook community and other people who watch this, they seem to enjoy it as well. So do you have any final thoughts before we can continue on the series or anything?
No, I'm looking forward to the next sermon is going to be Love Completely, Live Passionately, Love Completely. And then our final sermon is to leave boldly. Leave boldly. And so I hope you join us at First Christian Church for worship, or at least on podcast.
Yeah.
So we can live like we were dying.
Yeah. And hey, if you get a chance to listen to us on podcast, we're also on Apple Podcasts. So you don't have to go to the website. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. I believe there's a link on the website to go to that. And if you get a chance, give us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Facebook, something like that. Those reviews actually help a lot, and there are a lot of people who look for churches and who maybe don't go to church, and they say, well, this church has a lot of reviews, maybe I'll go visit them. So if you're looking to help us out and possibly get some new people or something like that, share this post or give us a good review on Google, Apple, Facebook. You can leave reviews anywhere nowadays, can't you?
There you go.
So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next week.